This past fall, one law school got 1,323 applications. It said yes to 700 applicants and enrolled 237 of them. This is all based off of this school's own filing with the American Bar Association. Now, this school's median LSAT score was a 147, which puts you in the bottom third of everyone who takes the LSAT. About 7 out of 10 applicants score higher than that, and fewer than 7 in 10 of their recent graduates got a full-time job that actually needs a law degree. Then this past September, the American Bar Association, the group that accredits law schools, put that school on probation. Now, this school is not a fluke, it's not unique, it's part of a pattern, and it's the same pattern that 8 different law schools were all part of, running that pattern in the years right before they died or lost the accreditation that made the degree worth the money. So I did the work. I pulled the ABA filings on every single law school that has closed or lost its accreditation in the last 10 years. Then I pulled this year's filings on the schools that are still open, and 4 of them are running the dead law school's playbook right now. So today I'm going to name all 4 of those law schools that are in danger of collapse, and the last one has the worst set of numbers I have ever seen on a filing like this. Let's start with those that already died. Charlotte School of Law, Arizona Summit, Florida Coastal. These are 3 different law schools in 3 different cities that all have this same owner. A private equity firm ran all 3 of them as a for-profit chain, and their own filings tell you exactly what that chain did. Let's look at Charlotte, for example. In 2011, their median LSAT was a 148. Over the next few years, their median dropped to 142. And you would think a school watching its LSAT scores drop would get smaller, it'd get more careful, but Charlotte did the opposite. It grew, it expanded. It went from about 800 students to over 1,400. They lowered the bar, and then they packed up the room. Arizona Summit ran the same play. Their median slid from a 148 down to the low 140s, and their enrollment climbed past 1,000. Now, Florida Coastal was the biggest of the 3, nearly 1,800 students at its peak, with a median stuck in the mid-140s. So the chain reaction here is simple. Low scores coming in means low bar passage going out. That's just what the numbers say about those scores. This is not a knock on any one student, but if your graduates can't pass the bar, they can't get licensed. And if they can't get licensed, they can't get the jobs. And if they can't get the jobs, then they can't pay off their student loans. Because, of course, you borrow the money with the assumption that you'll be able to pay it off based on your earning power after graduation. And there are, of course, accrediting bodies watching closely what happens here. The American Bar Association wants enough of a school's graduates to eventually pass the bar, and the government wants the loans they're handing out to actually lead somewhere. And so when a school is failing for long enough, the ABA pulls the accreditation and the government cuts off the loans, and the school folds. They close up. So in 2017, the Department of Ed cut off Charlotte's federal loans, and the ABA put it on probation. Charlotte was gone by the end of that year. Arizona Summit lost its accreditation and shut down in 2018. Florida Coastal hung on till 2021, then closed after the summer term. So these are 3 different law schools with thousands of students stuck with debt for a degree from a place that doesn't exist anymore. And those 3 weren't alone. Valparaiso in Indiana stopped admitting students in 2018, and they taught their last class in 2020. Whittier in California was actually the first ABA law school in the country to announce it was closing back in 2017. Golden Gate in San Francisco shut down its JD program in 2024 and shipped off its last students to other schools to finish. That's 6 schools just gone. Then there are 2 more that technically didn't close. They did something worse. Thomas Jefferson in San Diego and Laverne near Los Angeles both lost their ABA accreditation and dropped to a California-only state accreditation. And that's a pretty brutal downgrade because an ABA degree lets you take the bar exam in any state. A California-only degree really only works in California. So if you started at Thomas Jefferson planning to work in New York or Texas or back home, wherever home was, that option is closed off to you. And Thomas Jefferson's bar passage rate got so bad that in one recent July, only 4% of their first-time takers actually pass the California bar. I'm not saying 40%, I'm saying 4%, less than 5. So those are the 8 schools that are the worst, I would say. 6 of them are already dead and shut down. 2 of them are stripped of the accreditation from the ABA that makes the degree worth the money. Every single one of them was doing a version of the same 3 things. They took students with low and failing scores. They kept the classes big anyway, and some of them even grew the classes on purpose, and the bar and job numbers they filed quietly told you those students weren't landing where they'd been promised. Now let's look at this year's filings. Now, I'm not necessarily predicting these schools are going to close. 2 of the 4 I'm about to name got flagged by the ABA recently, then fought their way back to being in good standing, and they're still fighting to fix the issues. Some of them might pull it off. I'm just engaging here in pattern recognition, not necessarily a prediction. I want to show you which schools are running a risky playbook so that you can walk in with your eyes open before you sign for a loan. That's the whole point here. Now, one number to keep in mind, across the country, about 83% of law graduates land a real full-time legal job, the kind that actually requires the degree, 83%. So keep that number in mind as a benchmark, as a baseline, because not one of these 4 schools I'm going to name comes anywhere close. Number 1 is Cooley Law School. They used to be the largest law school in America. Then they shrank for 10 years. This past fall, they did the exact same thing the dead schools did. It grew. Their first year class jumped from 139 students to 237 students in a single year. This is off of their ABA filing, a jump of about 70% growth over 10 years. Sorry, just in 1 year, actually. They were shrinking for 10 years prior. Their median LSAT is at a 147. About 67% of their recent graduates are in a full-time job that needs the degree. And the ABA put Cooley on probation this past September for bar passage. Then they lifted it in November after their bar passage rate crawled up to 76.2%. Now, the line you've got to clear is 75%. So they cleared it by just a little over a point. The second school I want to talk about is Appalachian School of Law in rural Virginia. It's a small school. Their first year class grew from 62 students to about 88 students in just 1 year. That's growth of about a third or so. Their median LSAT's of 146, and about 63% of their graduates land a full-time job that actually requires the law degree. The most recent first-time bar passage rate in Virginia was 71%. The state average was about 85%, so they grew the class, while their bar scores were well below the rest of the state. Now, tuition there runs about $41,000 a year. Adding up 3 years of that tuition, throw in living expenses, and you're borrowing 6 figures, well over $100,000 in loans for a school where more than a third of the graduates don't land a job that requires the degree. Number 3 school I want to talk about is Inter-American University in Puerto Rico. First year class up from 156 to 205. Median LSAT is a 144. Only about half of their students end up in jobs that require the degree. Now, of course, Puerto Rico is a unique situation. They're not the mainland. You don't want to pretend it is. These schools serve a Spanish-speaking legal market. Their students take the Puerto Rico bar. And so the way the ABA counts jobs tends to treat that market harshly, so keep that in mind. But overall, the shape is still the same. Bigger class, lower scores, weaker job numbers. Which brings us to school number 4, Pontifical Catholic in Puerto Rico. One of the worst set of numbers I've ever seen. Their median LSAT's of 139, around the 10th percentile. 9 out of 10 people who take the LSAT score higher than the median student they let in. And this past year, the school grew its first year class from 113 students to 161, growth of about nearly 50%. Now, about 24% of their graduates are in a full-time job that requires the law degree. Only about 1 in 4, which means about 3 out of 4 graduates graduated and did not land a full-time job that requires the law degree. And same fairness point here about Puerto Rico once again. This school, like Cooley, got flagged by the ABA, then climbed back into good standing. So it's not going anywhere tomorrow, but look at the trends again. Every ABA accredited law school has got to publish 2 things. One is called a standard 509 report. The other is an employment summary. Both are on the school's own website, and both are on the ABA's website. You don't need me to break it down for you. You could look there yourself. The first number you want to look at, though, is the median LSAT, the score the middle student had. Half the class scored below it, half scored above it. If the median's below 150, the school is letting in a lot of people who, by the numbers, are going to struggle with the bar exam. The second number is the employment number. Now, don't use the big employment percentage the school puts on the homepage. That number counts everything, including working part-time as a barista at a coffee shop. the job that has nothing to do with law. You want to look at the job that requires a full-time, long-term bar passage, or JD Advantage. It's a fancy way of saying a real job that actually requires you having gotten a JD. So take that number, divide it by the number of graduates. If real legal jobs are landing for under 70% of the class, the school cannot reliably turn its own students into working lawyers. And so if a school's homepage is bragging that 90% of its graduates are employed, but only 45% are in jobs that require the law degree, where did the other 45% go? And why would the school count them in the first place? So again, your benchmarks, what you want to look at is their median LSAT score below 150, and are there real legal jobs under 70%? If the class is growing while both of those things are true, there is a real danger this school is in trouble. And so if you want to avoid being in that situation, going to worse law schools with lower bar passage rates, lower employment outcomes, if you want to go to better law schools with better employment outcomes, if you want to get more scholarship money, go to higher ranked law schools, the best path forward, of course, remains the same: getting the highest possible LSAT score. If you can get into a better law school, you can get more scholarship money, get into higher ranked schools for big law jobs, clerkships, whatever you want to do. The jobs options remain open to you. I'm happy to help you out. I'm offering free LSAT tutoring for anybody watching this now or later. You can book that free LSAT tutoring lesson with me personally. The link is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and IG as well. I've also put together a free LSAT cheat sheet to help you jumpstart your LSAT prep. You can grab that free LSAT cheat sheet PDF download at unpluggedprep.com/cheat sheet. Links to my bio, link below the video as well. Happy to help you out. I see questions here in the chat. I'll get to as many of them as I can. Feel free to keep them coming. I'll answer any and all questions, anything at all, LSAT and law school admissions. Scanning through here for what came in. Feel free to keep those questions coming. Brianna's asking, is this live only about law school? Well, we're talking LSAT prep, law school admissions. That's what I'm qualified to talk about. I'm happy to take other questions and I'll answer whatever I can. Sourdough lunch sandwich is saying, Harvard law student here. Awesome, welcome, glad to have you here. Feel free to share any perspectives you have as well. Cal from Mars is asking, what about a 166? Well, what about a 166? I mean, I guess what's your question? Like, is a 166 gonna be good enough to get you into law school? Maybe, depends. What's your undergraduate GPA? Then of course the question is, which law school? Every law school has its own unique requirements. There are about 200 American Bar Association accredited law schools. Each one has their own unique LSAT median. Each one has their own GPA median. And if your LSAT score is sufficiently high, that could help to offset a relatively lower GPA. For any given law school that you're considering, you can look up the stats in those American Bar Association 509 reports. That's a document the law schools are required to submit to the ABA, sharing data on their most recent matriculating class or entering class. Sam is asking, prepping for the LSAT in high school or during college or after college? I guess you're asking, when should you prep? Prep whenever you have the time. High school, of course, is premature. Your LSAT score is also only good for 5 years. So I'd say probably taking it as a junior or senior in college at the earliest is probably the move. Hypothetically, I suppose you could take it as a sophomore, but I would typically recommend focusing on maintaining a good undergraduate GPA earlier in college, choosing your major, deciding whether law school is truly what you want to do with your degree. Of course, but the LSAT's not going anywhere, law school's not going anywhere, and your law school admissions is a function of both your LSAT score and your undergraduate GPA. And so first things first, make sure you've got a good GPA, and then of course you can switch gears onto the LSAT when the time comes. Jay says, I'm thinking about Montana law. Okay, cool. So I guess what you want to think about is, what's your undergraduate GPA? How does that stack up relative to Montana's GPA median? And then what LSAT score do you need to be competitive? And of course, the answer is always, if you're asking what LSAT should I shoot for the highest LSAT score possible. It can only help to have a higher LSAT score. When you have a higher LSAT score, you can get to better law schools. You can also get more scholarship money. You always want to aim above the median of the law schools that you're targeting, and keep in mind that the median's a trailing metric. It's last year's numbers, and the law schools always want to raise up their own standing. They want to raise their spot in the rankings. It's an arms race, and there's inflation. There's inflation of GPAs. There's inflation of LSAT. Undergraduate GPA inflation is particularly problematic, considering that Not everybody majored in the same thing, right? Some people majored in STEM, some people majored in the humanities. Obviously, humanities has more grade inflation. And so law schools, as a rule, they place more emphasis on the LSAT score because it's a more apples to apples comparison, regardless of what you majored in for undergrad. Smoking Casuals asks, how much can a significantly high up position in running a law firm impact admissions chances? I've worked as a consultant on the business side of small law firms and am now a CTO of one. I would suspect that could help quite a bit, actually, because you probably have more hands-on experience with running a legal business than 99% of applicants. So I would think it would help a lot. I mean, part of what law schools want to see is that you have real-world exposure to the practice of law, that your understanding of law is not limited to pop culture portrayals in Suits or Legally Blonde, for example, or Better Call Saul, right? So they want to let you know what it's actually like, and you have more real exposure than virtually anyone. Of course, you don't need to have that exposure. There are, of course, KJDs, folks who go directly from undergrad into law school, who don't have that exposure, and they're not going to be automatically dinged or anything. But since you do have the experience, definitely talk about it in your application essays, get related rec letters, and of course, include on your resume. Hike asks, should I do early decision at UCLA or USC with a 4.0 GPA and a 168? If you're talking about binding early decision, I recommend against that for virtually anybody, because when you apply early decision, you lose virtually all scholarship negotiation leverage. Because you're basically saying to them, I want to go to your law school and I commit to go to your law school regardless of whatever you offer me. And so then the question becomes, well, why would they offer you anything? You've already committed. If you want to apply early, that's a different story, but early binding is a no-go in my book unless you literally don't care at all about scholarship money and you're willing to pay a sticker. To my earlier point about work experience in the law, Jazzy's asking, would the same be said for a paralegal or legal assistant? Definitely helpful as well to have the real world exposure, yes. CXXX is asking, or quadruple X, should I bother applying to T14 with a 172 LSAT and a 390 GPA? I'm a KJD. Those numbers are reasonable. I mean, you're within the median ranges, right? I mean, the top 14 GPA medians range from technically 388 up to 399, depending on how you count them. So you're within that range. 172 also is within the range of 170 to 174. So you're okay to apply. Your numbers are not above the medians on average, but you're not below either. So it's reasonable for you to apply. I would definitely shoot the shot. If you want to maximize your odds, retake the 172, aim for 176. Might have sounded crazy to say that 5-10 years ago, but the medians keep rising, and so that's no longer a crazy thing to say. You're within the medians, but if you want to be above the medians or above the 75th, I would retake. And you can retake in August or September and still apply plenty early in the cycle. Braden's asking, is there any data comparing your LSAT GPA to other applicants from your undergrad? If so, do law schools see it? Asking for a friend. Yeah, so you can actually look at user-submitted data on sites like lsd.law. That's all user-generated content of those, so those would take it with a grain of salt, but I would suspect the majority of it's probably pretty accurate, and so that can give you a reasonable sense of where you stack up relative to others from the undergrad. And law schools can, of course, browse those sites as well, but they don't really have a whole lot of reason to care about comparing you directly to others from your undergrad. They're comparing you against other applicants to their school. So I'd focus more on just what it is going to take to get in based on the medians, not relative to other applicants from your undergrad, because that's not who they're comparing you against. God's Peace is asking, essentially these schools can't afford us not to go to law school. So referring to the law schools that are in trouble, that are in danger of closing or losing their accreditation I was speaking about earlier. I mean, these law schools, in short, they need you more than you need them. They've got overhead. They are tuition dependent, meaning their operations are reliant on tuition revenue. And so that's part of why some of these schools that are in trouble will increase their class sizes to take in more revenue in the short term. The unfortunate side effect of that is that they are lowering their standards in order to take in more applicants, because the applicants with stronger numbers wouldn't go to those low-ranked schools. They go to better law schools. And so they got to take students with lower LSAT scores, lower GPAs. But the problem is that students with lower numbers have those lower numbers for a reason. They are less able to succeed in law school, less likely to pass the bar exam. Of course, that's not a proclamation or a guarantee that it will always be the case. Of course, there are exceptions, but on average, the LSAT is correlated with first-year law school grades and bar passage rates. And so somebody with a higher LSAT score is more likely to do well in law school and more likely to pass the bar. If they've got a below average LSAT score, if they're in the bottom 10%, they're less likely to pass the bar and less likely to do well in 1L. And so these schools who take on students who are more likely to fail are then also more in danger of shutting down. And then you don't want to go to a law school that shuts down halfway through your degree, then you're left high and dry. That's why I would say, again, read those employment outcomes carefully and the 509s carefully as well. Zach is asking, how much do law schools factor in if you took a very hard undergrad, such as aerospace engineering, and got a 3.1 GPA? I mean, listen, your GPA, your major is context. A 3.1 in aerospace engineering is obviously different than a 3.1 in English or history or sociology, given grade inflation more so in the latter humanities than the former STEM. But at the same time, when the law schools submit the medians of their entering class to the ABA, they're not getting into nuanced distinctions around what you majored in. And so your GPA effectively is relatively lower because of what you chose. And so you're going to have to balance that with a higher LSAT score. The good news, though, is that law schools weigh your LSAT score more heavily than your undergraduate GPA. And so all the more reason for you to place more focus on that. Esco's asking, is a T14 at sticker price more valuable than a full ride at a lower ranked school? That is the age-old question, right? Should you go to a higher ranked school with less or no scholarship money, or should you go to a lower ranked school with more scholarship money? The answer is, it depends. That's the annoying lawyerly answer, right? It depends. But it does. I mean, it depends on what you want to do with your degree. If you want to go into big law, if you want to get a federal clerkship, it could make sense to go to a top 14 law school, even if you're paying more for it, because you'll get a job afterwards that makes it easy to service the debt. If you could get a big law job paying $250,000 right out of law school, then you could pay off the debt pretty quickly. If you want to work in some other field, if you want to do family law or open your own practice, it's going to be harder to pay off that debt. It might make more sense to trade a bit of that prestige for more scholarship money and go to a lower ranked law school in that case. And of course, if you want to go into public interest or government work where the salaries are lower, then you might not want to take on 6 figures in debt. So it depends on what you want to do with your degree. So you can, of course, choose not to go to a T14 and still have a respectable career and still even have a respectable degree and a respectable job. I mean, you could go to a strong regional school that's not a T14, but it's still a T30 or a T50. There are a lot of great law schools that have good reputations in their region, in their state, but don't crack the T14, and that's totally fine. But again, the question is, what do you want to do with your degree? There are some jobs where you do want to have that T14 pipeline where firms are recruiting from the T14 specifically and even exclusively, but there are other jobs where the money that you pay for the prestige of the degree would essentially be wasted. So again, ultimately, you've got to consider what you want to do with the degree. P-Turd's asking, I am a URM with a 3.5 GPA and a 175 LSAT. Should I spend money to have a shot at a T14? When you say spend money, what do you mean? I mean, if you already have those numbers, where would you spend the money? On your application essays? On donations to the school? I'm not totally clear where you're spending it at this point. I mean, your GPA is below the medians. Of course, your LSAT's relatively strong. But if you're asking just, should you spend money on an application fee? You're saying as in applying. Yeah, I mean, I would spend money on the application fee. I mean, the application fee is a drop in the bucket compared to the value of having a degree from a T14. Your application fee is what's going to be like $100 or so, 150 at most, maybe. I haven't looked at application fees recently. A lot of schools, by the way, will actually waive your application fee if you ask. All you've got to do is ask. You have nothing to lose by asking them to waive it. And I would say shoot your shot. I mean, your GPA is below medians quite significantly, but your LSAT is above the medians. And so it's not crazy to give it a try and see what happens. Milk Money's asking, what's a bad GPA for law school? Bad, I would say, is relative to the school. If you're below the 25th percentile, let's say that. If you're below the median, then it's a little bit harder. If you're below the 25th, it's a long shot maybe, provided that you can't get an LSAT above the median to balance it out. Milk Money, by the way, is saying that every school I've applied to has waived the application fee. ESCO saying $80 for an application fee. They vary based on the school. Some are less, some are more, but a lot of them will waive it because they want more applicants to increase their selectivity, or I guess decrease their selectivity. They want to be viewed as more selective. Just scanning through for more questions here. Feel free to keep them coming. Dane is asking, how would a master's of social work with internship at a major U.S. city help in my application? I also have 9 months of full-time work as a financial regulator at the U.S. Department of Treasury. Cool. I mean, I think the regulator work is definitely related to law, right? I mean, law involves regulations, bureaucracy, working for the government. That's great work experience. Definitely make sure that comes across in your application and then you highlight it, talk about it in your essays. Masters of Social Work with internship, also nice, sure. But law school admissions is not like undergrad admissions where softs play a big role. It really is a lot more about your LSAT score and your undergraduate GPA. So highlight your softs in your applications, in your essays, get related rec letters. But at this point, I mean, you're leaving out the biggest factors here, which are your LSAT and GPA. You haven't shared those. I would say those are going to be more determinative of your chances. Peter's asking, how do I ask for them to waive the application fee? Should I call or should I email? I would email. Keep it simple. Save everybody some time. If you ask nicely, they'll probably say yes in a lot of cases. You don't have a lot to lose. They won't look down on you, or it won't be a red flag just because you asked. Jazzy's asking, I have a 3.2 undergraduate GPA. I plan to write an addendum. Will work experience help to counteract that GPA? Not as much as having a higher LSAT score will. So basically the order goes, your LSAT's the biggest factor, GPA is the second biggest factor, everything else is a different third, so you're distant third. So it's like you're asking, can a distant third factor offset the second factor? That's kind of getting things backwards. I'd be more like, if you didn't have work experience but had a strong GPA, that with a strong GPA would help to offset the lack of work experience, but not so much vice versa. What would really help you out is to get a higher LSAT score to offset the lower GPA. That's where I'd be focusing your time. And so my question is, like, is the LSAT a done deal for you, or would you consider a retake? Or have you taken it at all yet? That's where I would start. And by the way, folks, for those just joining, I've got a couple of freebies for you studying for the LSAT, those of you who are. I've put together a free LSAT cheat sheet. It's a quick reference PDF on everything logical reasoning and reading comprehension. It's a free download you can grab in the link below the video, in the chat, in my bio as well. I'm also offering a free LSAT tutoring lesson for everybody watching this now or later. You can book that free tutoring lesson with me personally at unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video, pinned in the chat, in my bio as well. During those free tutoring lessons, we look at where you're currently scoring, if you started yet, what your goal score is, what your time frame is, and then we map out an action plan to get you from here to there between now and then. And so we'll map out a study plan. Typically, we can divide LSAT prep into 3 major phases: accuracy, pacing, and endurance. Accuracy is drilling questions by type to better understand the proper perspective from which to view each section and each question type. Pacing is doing individual timed sections to work on how you're allocating time over the course of the section. And then endurance is doing full-length timed exams to build up your stamina. And so I see Lucas here is asking, when should I start studying for the LSAT? What year of college? Let's say, for example, you're a junior, you're a rising junior right now. You're going to start junior year in the fall. You could study it, maybe take a light semester this fall, study harder over winter break, take it in January or February, and then you are ahead of the game. You're ahead of schedule because you can then retake it in the summer of next year if you needed to, and apply at the beginning of the cycle in the fall of your senior year if you want to go straight from undergrad into law school. So for those of you who are earlier in college, that might be the plan. And then freshman, sophomore year, you still are just focusing on maintaining a good GPA. I know a lot of you are gunners and want to start now, but the thing is the LSAT's not going anywhere. Law school's not going anywhere. If your GPA is low, the best move you could make right now when you're earlier in college is just to get your GPA up. Law school admissions is your undergrad GPA plus your LSAT score combined, determining your chances. I see Dane here is asking about a 3.1 undergrad GPA, master's GPA being a 4.0. The thing is that your undergrad GPA is what matters for law school. They don't factor in your graduate level GPA. It's nice to see, of course, as a soft, but they're not putting it into their formulas when calculating your chances. And so if you're still an undergrad and you've got a 3.1, you've got time to raise it up. If undergrad's already a done deal and you finished, then of course you got to shift focus to only the LSAT as your move to raise up your score. I see Dane saying the practice tests are around a 168, 172, aiming for 175 plus. Yeah, so I would say focus your efforts, and in your case, getting up to 175 plus, book the free tutoring lesson with me if you haven't already. That's the biggest thing you could do to boost up your chances. If you were still an undergrad, I'd say spend some time raising up the GPA, but if that's already done, the LSAT's the only factor that you can really impact significantly at this stage. John's asking, what's a quick reading comp tip for someone scoring in the 165, 170 range that they may not have heard yet? Well, I would first point you to my YouTube videos. My YouTube channel, LSAT Unplugged, is linked in my bio on TikTok and IG. I've got a lot of in-depth walkthroughs on reading comprehension. One thing a lot of people don't realize is that there are a limited set of structures or skeletons, as I call them, for LSAT reading comp passages. These are independent of the topic. People will talk about natural science, social science, humanities, and law. But the topic really never matters. It's the structure that matters. If you understand which reading comp skeleton you're looking at, independent of the topic, and you can pattern match that, you'll be able to navigate the passage a lot more easily, kind of like how in logical reasoning, understanding an argument comes down to the method of reasoning, how the author goes about making their argument. There is something similar going on in reading comprehension, but most people haven't really learned that or determined that yet, because reading comp's a lot bigger than logical reasoning. It's like you're reading 4 stimuli or arguments all compressed into one passage of 450 words. And so one thing that we do in our coaching programs is we help you understand the common reading comp structures or skeletons so that when you see a new passage, you can relate it back to those that you've seen before. And so if you want to learn more about that, of course, and you want to look into getting some personalized support, if you haven't already, you could book the free tutoring lesson with me, unpluggedprep.com/start, and we could talk through it together. I also talk about this a bit in my free LSAT cheat sheet, linked below the video in the chat, in my bio as well, unpluggedprep.com/cheat sheet. Peter saying, my profs are saying that LSAT scores are starting to become undervalued. How true do you think this is? Well, let's assume hypothetically that was true. Where do you think law schools are devoting more attention if they were devoting less attention to the LSAT? They've got LSAT to look at, they've got GPA to look at, they've got application essays to look at. And there are problems with all of these metrics. No metric is perfect. But if you look at GPAs, as bad as LSAT score inflation has been since the pandemic, GPA inflation is even worse. I mean, the T14 LSAT GPA medians are 392 to 399 roughly. A 399 median, meaning that half of their students have above a 399, they're in the 4.0 range, half of them. That's pretty nuts. Obviously, lots of universities giving out easy A's in the humanities. I've experienced that myself back when I was in college, even, and it's only gotten worse over the past 20 years or so. Application essays are becoming useless with AI writing it for people with ChatGPT. And so, if anything, GPA being less useful, application essays being less useful, if anything, I would think that makes the LSAT relatively more useful. And the LSAT's got its problems, of course. There's been cheating on the LSAT with it moving online. There is LSAT score inflation with more accommodations and such, removal of logic games. But as bad as the LSAT is, the other factors seem even worse to me. So I don't think that LSATs are getting undervalued or devalued. I think that each part of the application has its problems, but if anything, I would think that the LSAT's going to become more useful over time as the other parts become less useful. And because of the application essays becoming meaningless with AI helping people on those, that's yet another reason why the LSAT is going to move towards scoring the writing sample. They've already alluded to that. They've already added a writing ability score field on the score report, and they don't go around doing that for no reason, of course. They're not doing it this year, but maybe next year or the following, I would suspect. And they'll give plenty of notice when they make that change, but that is something I think we'll be seeing in the next few years. And so if you want to avoid a scored writing sample, if you don't want to have to think about preparing for the writing sample, I would say knock out the LSAT within the next year, because they're not going to score it before the summer of next year. So you've got at least 12 months before they make that change. Thanks for joining, folks. If you find this helpful, please spread the word. I do these lives every single weekday, same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific, here on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, wherever you're watching this. If you find this helpful, share it to your socials, share it in group chats, Facebook groups, Discord, subreddits. The more this grows, the more I'll expand it over time. I'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific. I'll see you all then. In the meantime, all the best. Take care. Thanks for